Welcome to the Housing Digital Micro Conference on the Building Safety Act, the future of compliance in housing. With the Building Safety Act now fully operational, it is important to understand just what this new legislation will mean for housing. In this session this morning, we will highlight the challenges that lie ahead for providers and how they can utilize data and IoT technology to prepare for the changes. Housing providers are already seeing the benefits of remote monitoring technology, such as deterring issues before they arise. This session will explore how such innovation will prove pivotal as the Building Safety Act comes into force, ushering in a new era of housing compliance. I'm very excited today to hear from four keynote speakers, the first of which is Nick Davies, the Commercial Director of Switchy. Over to you. Feel free to share your screen, please.
Thank you very much for inviting us to present and to have the lead slot. From our perspective, I think what we're going to try and do is actually take a resident-centered approach to the application of BSA itself. So how we use data and the insight that's provided to ensure that residents are ultimately looked after. Before we go into that, I'm sure most people are aware of who Switchy are, but there may be a few people that aren't. Switchy ultimately are here to improve the lives of those that live in rented accommodation. We've now been working solely and specifically with those in social housing for the last 9 years. We are the largest platform of interconnected devices, of IoT devices, currently in social housing itself. And it's very much working with providers to move you from being reactive to being proactive by providing that actionable insight. Typically, that actionable insight is around the performance of the properties that are under your management, under your stewardship, how that impacts your residents. And conversely, actually, that's a really important part, obviously, of that triangulation, is how the residents themselves engage with the homes that you provide, the homes that they currently live in. Excuse me. That's a little bit about Switchy. We're going to talk probably a little bit more about how we do that in a short while. But obviously, this micro conference is very much centered on the Building Safety Act itself. Now, we're all aware that the Building Safety Act was a consequence of the terrible consequences of Grenfell. Very much fire safety is the core objective of the Building Safety Act, but isn't just limited, of course, to fire safety itself. It's very much intended to raise the safety standards of all homes, but obviously there's a particular focus on the higher risk buildings, those with greater than 7 floors, those with multiple residential units, for example. And a part of the objective of the Building Safety Act was the formation of the Building Safety Regulator themselves. And now their prime objective, of course, is to make residents safe in their homes. And that is quite a wide range and broad statement. Of course, it's very much centered upon the fire safety aspects, absolutely. But there's a whole range of other considerations in ensuring that homes are fit for purpose and are providing a safe environment for your residents. But it's not just about making residents safe in their homes, it's actually making residents feel safe in their homes. So it's about restoring the confidence rather than just being safe, it's feeling safe. And I think where a lot of regulation acts previously have not really focused at all on the residents. And I think from our perspective, this is very much trying to place the resident at the centre and put them absolutely at the heart of the building safety. But the reality is that the Building Safety Act it's not really just about that. We really need to be considering the whole home in any new builds or retrofit. Any of the homes that are under your stewardship really need to consider the whole home, of course, but we also need to consider other acts because they're going to be overlapping and they're going to be complementary. In particular, you've got other compliance obligations around the Social Housing Regulation Act, and under which, of course, you've got AWAB's law. Now, these are complementary, they are overlapping, and they are also intended to be resident-centred. Obviously, AWAB's law, which is a whole other session all on its own, is very much about making sure that we are responding to hazards beyond Category 1, but it's also making sure that we're focused on the resident, but keeping the resident engaged and informed about what's going on. And it's also very much around how we're using technology to enable that to occur. So it's all well and good thinking about building fire safety, those elements, but how does that impact then the Social Housing Regulation Act and AWAB's law? How do these things work together? So with those considerations in mind, how do we come in? How do we make use of IoT and data to help with those objectives of making the residents not just be safe, but feel safe and be engaged in their homes? How do we do this job of moving you from being reactive to being proactive? And how ultimately providing the right amount of information and actionable insights get those actual insights into your hands so you can then do something about it. You can then engage with your residents. The way Switchy approach that is, but actually, this is exactly what we do. We've got a platform of insight, a platform of data, and we seek to provide those prioritized actionable insights either into your systems of engagement and systems of record, whether it's your housing management systems, your asset management systems, repairs, platforms, CRMs, etc., or through a suite of role-based dashboards themselves that your own teams can access themselves. Now, that actual insight provides you high-level information on the performance of the homes that you have. It directs you to those homes where you are required to provide interventions, and it enables you to drill down to a really granular level, to an actual home level, as to why that home is being flagged to you as requiring some kind of form of intervention. Now, where do we get our data from? How do we do that? Of course, we're talking about IoT here. So the way we do that is we have a smart heating control, smart thermostat. Now, there's benefits from a smart thermostat in the home anyway, because of course it enables the residents to have a much more efficient way of engaging with the heating systems. But that is a reason for being, that's the purpose of being in the home. That has a payload of other sensors built into it, so we can monitor the actual performance and the environment within the home itself. Now, we bring that data back, as well as the information around how the resident engages with their heating system in their home. And that is brought back over a 4G SIM card, doesn't require any local internet. And that brings that data back into our platform, where we apply our algorithms, produce the insight, which ultimately gets played back to yourself. Now, because that is a 4G SIM card in the device that enables us to bring the information in, it also enables a two-way communication with the resident. And we'll pick up more on this in a short while, but what that means is, once we've understood what's going on in the home, whether we've identified risks of damp and mold, for example, or we've identified risks of overheating because the property is over-insulated, these other unintended consequences you might get from new build or retrofit, you have the ability then to engage with the resident and provide guidance and advice, or signpost them to other resources and means to move them forward. So it's very much using this insight, using the data to positively impact and engage and communicate with the resident, all through a single solution. So we're talking about, okay, providing a whole safe, warm home. We touched on it a moment ago. Our macro data across, we've got 35,000 installed, 35,000 homes now across the whole of the UK, a wide range of different archetypes, from the high risk, multi-story, multi-floor buildings through to homes. And what we see consistently actually is that the retrofitted properties and the new build properties consistently have the same set of unintended consequences. And the first one amongst them is we're very good at insulating and getting rid of drafts, but that of course prevents really good ventilation in the home itself. More often than not, the ventilation systems specified are underspecified or are not fit for purpose in terms of making sure that home is properly ventilated. Now, here's what you're seeing here is a trace from one particular home. It's a brand new property, which was constructed very much with fire safety and energy performance in mind. But what you can see is actually very high relative humidity levels in the home itself versus lower levels of relative humidity outside of the home. Now, we were able to identify that, an intervention was put in place, the ventilation system was improved, and you can see a consequential drop off in humidity itself. Now, we're all aware that high humidity levels ultimately, if left as they are, may well lead to a damper mold issue. And we're looking at safety in the home itself. We all know that damper mold is a particular challenge. But we're also very mindful of making the home, the resident able to operate their home and work within the home and engage with the home much more effectively. Energy transition is another challenge. When you move in your residents from gas boiler systems to things like heat pump, that requires a behaviour shift. Okay, so what we're able to do is also provide information here around which residents are engaging properly and operating within the home effectively, and which residents need the guidance and advice to improve what they're doing. We touched on a moment ago, and I've only got a moment or two left. We touched on a moment ago, it's great getting this data and great getting this insight. It's great for you having this information in your hand, but what do you do with it? Now, of course, you can use this information to inform your future strategy, asset management strategy, but at the same time, you've got residents that need your support and engagement. So as part of the data we can pull back, and part of the capability is being able to then actually liaise with the resident. You know, for example, if they're not engaging in a new heating system effectively and they want to use it in a more efficient way, to be able to communicate with that resident and offer the guidance and advice that they need. Am I still okay for a moment? Right, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you just hit the 10-minute mark, Nick, but you're okay for a few more seconds, mate. I'm going to wrap up.
So in the breakout session a moment ago, we had one of our colleagues, Glenn from Denby, talking about the IRP programme in Wales, and it's very much one of the programmes we're engaged with through Newport City Homes. But this very much is that overlap between providing sustainable, funded retrofit programmes, but making sure that they are also safe, warm, but not overheating homes themselves. So being able to identify and deal with the unintended consequences of the building works that we're dealing with is pretty important. So I suppose just wrapping the whole session up here, yes, of course, Building Safety Act is very important. It's important to make sure that we've got a safe home itself. But the key thing here is how do we ensure that future operation, the future occupancy of the home is as intended, and making sure we can use any data we gather to make really informed decisions and really informed interventions. Hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of where we assist with that.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick. Have we got any questions?
I was contemplating this earlier, Nick, and I was like wondering what's the risk of developing a sense of complacency? It's like, oh, we've got the tech, we've got the data coming in, it's got us covered. I mean, is there a risk of getting complacent that the technology has got us covered? I mean, listening to you speak, it became more evident that you've got, like, you know, constantly looking at it. But is there a risk that you could get complacent, thinking the technology's got you covered?
I would argue the complacency is actually the other way around at the moment. I think technology is there to enhance what you're doing, not replace what you're doing. It's there to make it more efficient. It's there to target your resources in a much more focused, efficient way. It's not really there to replace necessarily. It's just it's to enhance. So I would, more often than not, the challenge is actually resistance to change in our experience, rather than how can this enhance what we're doing.
Thank you for your question, Mark. Have we got any more questions for Nick, please?
Hi, Nick. Just a quick one with regards to the comms back with you to and from with your tenant. Is that via text SMS, or is that more like a prompt to contact your provider, your housing association?
It's actually within the device itself. Now, because you've installed that smart thermostat in the home of the resident, we actually have a 90% engagement rate with the messages. Now, typically residents either get a letter through the post, they either get text amongst millions of others, or they get an email amongst millions of others. So your engagement rates are really low. The fact that it's a message on the device itself from you means that it's automatically trusted. So it's on the device, and the resident can respond to that, and you can have really effective communication. And what you see is actually your resident satisfaction rates go up quite high because engagement rates are increasing as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick, for a really insightful presentation there, and clearly a very innovative company, Switchy, in what you're doing. Just to summarise today's micro conference, then we first heard from Nick Davies, who's the commercial director at Switchy. Nick introduced Switchy's platform and how they work with housing associations to provide warm, safe And energy efficient homes, the technology that Switch developed can be seen by the resident via a 4G connection and with the data gathered from their IoT sensors. Nick gave us a really cool case study of how the data can show patterns, which can not only improve the homes, but by adding new ventilation systems, for example, to prevent mold, obviously helping housing associations to create the strategies moving forward. We then heard from Vicky Houghton. Vicky was should say, the head of asset compliance at Taurus. Vicky delved into the strategy and the actions that Taurus have taken to respond to the Building Safety Act. In all parts of the business, Taurus have looked at how they can improve the process and the communication internally, as well as with residents externally, taking a full holistic approach to how to respond to building safety. Using tech, but also face-to-face interactions and various platforms to gather more data. Taurus are creating and improving continuously in building safety. Our third keynote was our architectural contribution from Andy Wan. Andy was the director of BTP Architects and looking at the on-site building aspects of the Building Safety Act and compliance from an architect's perspective. His presentation answered the question of what housing associations should be looking at when analysing their housing stock and identifying any non-compliance issues. The main takeaways we found from Andy's presentation was that we don't know what we're working with always. The correct team needs to be in place with the right qualifications. Good communication is key, and processes are in place. And to always keep in mind the phrase, do the right thing. And then our fourth and final keynote presentation was, of course, from Heidi Flack. Heidi is the Director of Compliance and Building Safety at Anchor Housing Group. Heidi introduced the policy within Anchor's building safety and how they have implemented this, how it is continuously improving to get the right balance of face-to-face engagement, tech, platforms, IoT, and on-site data to use it in the right way. Heidi talked about the art of the possible and how you can improve things within your own organisation. She summed up the whole point of this microconference very well by reminding us to remember the why. With Glenfell and obviously then hugely unnecessary deaths can be avoided, and that's why we're here and doing what we're doing. So big thank you to all four of our keynote presentations today. And just a quick reminder from me, a couple of things. A couple of dates for your diary. We have our Housing Innovation Show returning in 2025 on the 12th and 13th of Feb. Our brand new website for that is now live, www.housinginnovationshow.co.uk, a live event in person, 2 days. Huge showcase of innovation in the housing sector taking place at the ICC, which is where the National Housing Fed used to have their conference in Birmingham, central Birmingham. And also our next online micro conference, the 19th of September, all about regulation and making the grade. So thank you for everyone who attended today, and a big warm thank you to all our presenters as well. So thank you for attending. That wraps up today's micro conference. Thank you very much.